Last week, we reflected on the role of love, especially in the form of mutual forgiveness, in the establishment of a truly evangelistic Christian community. But there's always a problem with a generic call to be a community, is how do you actually do that? My challenge to reflect on how much you value the faith and forgiveness of others in the community is a place to start. But if we leave it at the level of a vague reflection, it's hard to go further. So this Sunday's readings gives us a slightly more tangible touchstone, if we look for it. Notice the numbers in this reading. 2 disciples, the 11. And notice the pronouns, us, we, they. Even the word you is plural most of the time. Community is not a byproduct of Jesus' resurrection, as if a bunch of individuals decide to be close together because they all agree Jesus rose from the dead. No, instead, community is the very context in which the resurrection is revealed. It is the conversation between these 2 disciples that first sets the stage for Jesus to begin his revelation. What are you discussing? He asks them. This exchange between friends has opened their hearts and piqued their curiosity. And stepping into that conversation, that friendship, Jesus is able to foster that desire and ultimately satisfy it, breaking open the scripture for them. Then again, after Jesus reveals himself in the breaking of the bread, it is in turning to each other that these 2 realize, were not our hearts burning within us? Self-reflection is necessary and powerful. Some of us are better at introspection than others. But who hasn't had the experience of saying something to a friend and only realizing that you thought or felt a certain way as you're explaining it to them? How many of us have experienced something and immediately thought, I need to tell this person? And I've often heard people say that an event doesn't seem real until they've shared it with at least one other person. And then consider what happens next. They just walked 7 miles, arriving at Emmaus when it's nearly evening. And they invite Jesus in. He's revealed to them in the breaking of the bread. And after supper, when it's already getting dark, they decide to walk 7 miles back to Jerusalem. Would you make that trip alone in the dark? Maybe. But would having a good friend to walk it with you make you more likely to go? Almost certainly. And then consider what they find when they arrive. The 11, men who have spent 3 years almost constantly together. They are gathered together. They too have exciting news. The Lord has appeared to Simon. It doesn't say that Simon says Jesus appeared to them. It is all of the 11 who speak for Simon. And it's a little funny to say because Simon's included in that number 11. His experience is treated like it already belongs to the whole group. So close is their relationship. And we see that same intimacy at work in the Acts of the Apostles, about 6 weeks after these events. Simon Peter stood up with the 11 to proclaim the gospel to all of Jerusalem. And when he speaks of being a witness to the resurrection, he doesn't refer to just his experience. He says, we are all witnesses. The bond between him and the other apostles is an essential part of his credibility and his willingness to speak. He even addresses the crowd with the plural and affectionate term, my brothers. This is not merely an argument of facts, a case to be made, but it is an expression of a relationship rooted in a shared truth. Peter's letter in the second reading continues this trend. Your faith and your hope are in God. If you invoke as Father, using the plural form of the word you, and if we invoke the same Father, does that not make us brothers and sisters? But again, we can veer back into this general exhortation to be a community. The challenge this week is to see more closely that that community is made up of particular friendships, interconnecting circles of friends. The work of moving from merely being in the same church building to becoming authentic evangelistic community. And again, I cannot stress that it requires us to be evangelizers to fulfill our salvation. The journey from associated individuals in the same place to loving community goes by way of friendships. What then is friendship? Alice von Hildebrand once called friendship the remnant of paradise in a beautiful essay on the topic. And indeed, Jesus himself made friendship the very condition of our salvation. He teaches that there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And what many miss in that story, in that moment, is the implicit challenge that if we are not friends of Jesus, we do not benefit from him laying down his life. True friendship is not only a remnant and foretaste of heaven, it is a requirement for our salvation to be a friend of Jesus. And he tells us on Holy Thursday how to do that. Keep his commandments. What commandment? Love one another. So this is the path to salvation. Love that generates friendship. Friendship that grows to authentic community. Community that bears witness to the gospel. What does that mean for you and for me? Be a friend to people here in this community. Not just a neighbor, a business partner, a sharer of pews, a friend like Cleopas and the other disciple, like Peter and the 11. A friend who doesn't just share hobbies like fishing and hunting and the same shows on Netflix. These things can be the seed, a start of real friendship. But what makes a friend is ultimately the choice to invest in what is good for another, to spend the time in person, to offer the help, to pay the attention required for mere niceness to become actual love, willing the good of the other. And there's nothing better that a friend can do than to get their friend to heaven. The road to Emmaus has many obvious and wonderful lessons. Study Scripture, go to Mass, recognize Jesus in the Eucharist, tell other people about Jesus. But don't forget this one. You must walk the road of discipleship, of salvation, with someone else. Last week I asked you if this community matters to you. This week I asked you, do you have friends in this community? People you pray with, discuss faith with, share burdens with. Would you like to? Then show up and be a friend. Yes, it's awkward, especially as adults. Yes, we are all very busy. Yes, there is almost always something more fun to do than what we can offer here. But when your faith is at the bottom, will Netflix have a listening ear for you? When the culture tries to convince your kids and grandkids that it's okay to reject God and mutilate their own bodies, who will fight for them with you? Your boss? Your clients? Your kids' coaches? Your hunting buddies? Will those people still love you if you could no longer work or play or hunt? Because a real friend, a fellow disciple, will. And even better, they'll fight for your salvation, knowing that just as they now share in your cross, they will one day share in your victory. And what could be better than sharing victory with a friend?